Did you think this day would ever come? We're going to do it today. We're going to finish the last chapter of the book of Acts. And as we do, we're going to pull a lot of the loose ends and strands we've been following through together. And I think we've got a fairly clear idea on where this is headed. But let's begin with Acts chapter 28. And we'll read from verses 1 through 10 and just put the finishing touches on that sea voyage that we saw last week as Paul made it all the way to Malta. So Acts 28 verse 1. Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us because it was raining and cold. That's a surprise since they just come out of a storm, right? Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper driven out by the heat fastened itself on his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man must be a murderer, for though he escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live." But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. The people expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead, but after waiting a long time and nothing unusual seemed to happen to him, they changed their minds and they said he was a god. There was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and for 3 days entertained us hospitably. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went in to see him and after prayer placed his hands on him and healed him. When this happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. They honored us in many ways, and when we were ready to sail, they furnished us with the supplies we needed. Let's just pick up on this section first, because as we go through this piece, we start to see that God has already gone ahead of Paul as this section comes, just like he's been doing all the way through the book. So we're going to start off with the first thing we're going to notice, and so it's 28, 1 through 10. And I just want to put up here that God provides. We've seen that already, he provided by getting them to shore safely, but we're seeing something more than that. When they got there, the people received them. Something was happening. People were there to do something and to make that opportunity, that landing, a good landing for him. So God provides. Second thing I want us to pull out of here, just move quickly through this, is that Paul continues to minister. It would have been easy for Paul to sit down and say, you know, I just come through the most wretched voyage I ever could have come through. I have thrown up everything I ever could have wished to eat. I really don't, I'm drained, I'm exhausted. I put up with these people who didn't believe in the word I was saying. I finally made it here. I've done enough. I'm just going to sit at the beach and they can minister to me. Now, would you say that was wrong? It's okay, isn't it? But that's not Paul's attitude. And we put it up last time that he was missiocentric. The alternative to that, of course, is to be egocentric, right? So Paul, whose fingers were as cold as anybody else, is out gathering wood for the fire. He's doing stuff. Paul. Yeah.
This is just an illustration where Paul says, for me to live is Christ.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it just shows how lacking I am.
No, for me to live is Christ. That's his focus as he's here. Remember, as he comes in a situation, he interprets the situation of what does God want me to do in this set of circumstances. And that's the key. We've seen it again and again through his ministry, and without dwelling on it too much now, because we just want to pull this strand together, is that God provides not so that Paul can absorb it in himself, but so Paul can use the opportunity to minister. And it's that focus that goes through his life again and again. We see that. You knock him down, he ministers. You pick him up, he ministers. Whatever you do to him, he ministers. Now, we don't have quite that same focus today. We're kind of really narcissistic in our approach. And we tend to think that everything's for us and poor me and I've done too much. And it's a killer attitude because it destroys our mission. And I don't want to go to the prayer meeting because it's Friday, I'm tired. I don't want to, and we stop and we put things down. Oh, I can't be bothered talking to that person. It's just such a drain. And we're focusing on me, me, me. The worst thing about an egotist is they never shut up long enough to let them hear about me. They're never quiet long enough so I can tell them about me. They're always talking about themselves. On the other hand, an egotist never gossips. See, there's some good things about this. Where are we? And I think this is the challenge as we go past this. Even in the process of doing something, this viper bites him. What's his reaction? Oh, look at me! Oh, I've been hurt! Oh! Or, get on with the job. And I think this is an attitude we're seeing, and I think that's why this gets included here. Because it's helping us to understand that we can spend our lives worrying about us, but we're called to spend our lives serving Him. There's a difference. And as they go through, the third thing that goes with this is at the end of this passage we see again that God provides. God provides first of all with healing for the consul's father, and He also provides with provisions for the next stage of the journey, because they got shipwrecked, they had nothing. And I think as we see that, we realize that what's going on here is that Luke is reminding us, you know, you're going to go a lot of places, you're going to do a lot of things, but what you do with God is really the only thing that counts. So, without dwelling further on that, let's move further because we want to get ourselves to Rome.
Chris?
Sure.
If I could argue with you.
Yeah, please. I'd love to.
I know that's a futility I'm outmatched, but...
No, you're not. I'm scared now, I'm shaking.
To minister means that you've got some wholeness in your life. And sometimes you do have to pull that and regroup and regain energy or sanity or whatever to continue on.
Yes.
Not everybody's a type A like Paul.
Right.
Not everybody's single like Paul. Not everybody is Paul. And where I don't disagree with what you're saying, there just seems sometimes when you burn out and you need to R&R so that you can come back into the fray.
Right. You're raising a very valid point, because this is not about pushing ourselves to weird extremisms and stuff like that. But I think there's another underlying truth in here that I want to push at. Because I learned as a kid doing swimming and stuff that when I had given 100% and I had done my very best effort, my coach would say to me things like, well, that was about an 85. I just gave it everything. It's the fastest time I've ever done. What are you talking about? Well, you know, you can go better. Your stroke was wrong. I'm going to show you what you do. He's never happy. There's always more. I don't have the energy to give more. But you have the potential to give more. You need to just keep going. That's what the coach does. And I think that this egocentrism thing cheats us. Because we get into the stage where we start listening to not to God, but to ourselves. And I'm not just saying what you're saying, Ted, because you are saying something very valid. This is not about machinery. This is about people, and people do hurt. But I think there's another dimension that we often miss, and that is that God doesn't expect us to give out of our surplus. He expects us to give out of our need. That's weird. Bottom line is, if you find that you're in a situation where you don't have any friends, go and be friendly. But our reaction is to say, oh, nobody wants to talk to me, I'll sit by myself. And so the ego part leads us to turn inwards, but the missiocentric leads us to push outwards. And I can't explain that because it's like a paradox, really. But Paul had every right to sit there and say, I have done enough. And we would not disagree with that. However, he's looking for the opportunity. So I know what you're saying, Ted, and I'm not trying to negate that. I think that's very valid. But I think often for us, the point of enough comes in our heads way before the real time. And instead of us being in a situation where we are seeing ourselves as giving people, we see ourselves as being in need of receiving. And I think that when we give, that's when we discover the provision that God has. So there's another dimension here. A lot of people stop there because they're listening to themselves. But ask yourself when that's happening to you, should I really stop? Or is there just a little bit more that I can do? And it may not have been. Maybe he didn't need to gather wood, but he did. And as he did so, he's rubbing shoulders with the people, and they're learning by the example. And example is one of those great teachers. Is that, are we okay, Ted? We're doing good? So it's a good point to raise. Yeah, Joe.
Well, I'm interested in this serpent, and so I looked it up while you were talking, and because there are no more vipers on Malta now, they're all gone. But supposedly this was probably an adder. An adder is what was on Temple of Doom with Indiana Jones, if you remember.
All right, now we get the background.
And it was thought that this was very meaningful for people on the island because probably many of those people had experienced family members who had died from this. Yeah. So the fact that it was that specific kind of a snake and this happened just like that was really a kind of it was an absolute divine sign that to pay attention to what Paul's going to say.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think this was a lethal snake. There's no doubt about that. And people who got bitten, the expectation was, you're going to be long, you're going to be dead. We just watch it, and that's what they did. Okay, let's count. 1, 2, 3. No one's ever lasted past 15. He's still going. 27, 28. What's going on with this? He's still working. What's wrong with him? And of course, it is exactly that. He got the attention. And again, come back to the egocentric thing. What we're doing? Oh, quickly, help my wife. I'm going to die. Focused on what? Me. But he's focused on what God is doing. And he knows that God is sending him to, and there's no place like Rome. We're going to go there. I had to get that line in, sorry.
And you could even spiritualize it saying that, the serpent is kind of a kind of sign of Satan or the devil, of shaking the devil off, of shaking what he's doing off in our lives as Christians and going on.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of rich imagery here, and if we dwell much longer, we're never going to finish the book. But, but you're right, and I think when we see these things, there's pictures that are being put in here for us to understand who was in charge of this process. We've seen it all the way through the book of Acts. It's a 3-letter word, starts with G. God, thank you. Oh, I was pretty worried if I come out the wrong word. So that's kind of where we are. Let's pick up verse 11 then, and we'll go down to verse 16. After 3 months, and I just have to put something else in here before we go through. Publius didn't invite all 276 people to his place, I don't think. I think he invited the centurion and centurion's prisoners, key prisoners, and probably the centurion's troops were housed in his garage out back somewhere. So it's not like he was offering hospitality to everybody. But this is something that's seen and something that's recognized, and the people on the island knew this was happening. So after 3 months he put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with the figureheads of the twin gods, Castor and Pollux. We put in at Syracuse and stayed there 3 days. From there we set out and sailed to Rhegium. The next day the south wind came up, and on the following day we reached Puteoli. There we found some brothers who invited us to spend a week with them. So we came to Rome. The brothers there had heard that we were coming, and they travelled as far as the Forum of Appius and the 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these men, Paul thanked God and was encouraged. When we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. I have a question in this passage. What happened to the centurion? Because Paul's a prisoner, right? No? And he's being taken to Rome, right? And now we're spending a week here and 3 days here and all sorts of people. This is more like a celebrity entrance to Rome rather than the prisoner coming in with chains and disgrace. What's going on? Why is the centurion missing? Shouldn't he have an opinion about these things?
Is his job done?
His job is